Dolewite, Mayor Freddie O'Connell, thank you for doing this.
Yeah, good to be with you.
All right, so the first thing I want to talk to you about, and I know that the city really doesn't have much to do with what's going on with TSU. I know this is a state issue, but for those of us that are a little confused, myself included, what is going on at Tennessee State University? What happened there?
Yeah, I mean, and I will say I'm probably not a true subject matter expert here, but I think you and your listeners probably have some sense of legislation last year that changed out quite a bit of the TSU board, kind of vacated that and sort of said, we're going to hit a little bit of a reset here. And again, don't know all the details here, but we know that Glenda Glover, who had been the president of the university, and I'm not sure exactly all this, but sort of announced retirement, and you've got a new president. The interim has already left.
Right.
Got now another new president. So a lot of volatility and leadership there. An audit that has just come out. You've seen the AOB go through a band director change. I mean, so just tremendous amount of volatility at the university, and that's all offset against this, years worth of findings that the state may owe TSU quite a bit of money.
I've heard different figures on that too. I've heard half a billion to up to $2 billion.
Yeah, billion or more. And so not really sure how that resolves. And I guess that's why, to me, we've been focused as much as we can on just whatever local levels of support we can offer our entire HBCU ecosystem. We did have more direct involvement in Fisk University. There had been some American Rescue Plan Act funds there, but we also, before I left council and took office as mayor, did something that set up so that all 4 of our HBCUs could offer their faculty, staff, and students fare-free access to our transit system.
Yes.
And so those kinds of things, those quality of life, cost of living scenarios, we've got a project with our local Department of Transportation that's working on smart corridors that involve TSU students. And so we're always looking to bring the city closer to the campus. And that's not unique to TSU, but it's very much, we have a lot of TSU alums on our team. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of Go Big Blue spirit on our staff in the city. I've had the opportunity to go to TSU's homecoming multiple times. I've seen lots of their both sports and academic growth over the past several years up close and personal. And it's I would say, thinking about what friends of mine who have gone and gotten involved in their agriculture program or know how that has impacted the city and kind of the value of that land and opportunity for the students. But yeah, details about where the university goes from here, I think those are playing out at levels above my pay grade.
No, I get it. I did hear a rumor, and you probably don't know whether this is true or not, or maybe you haven't even heard this, but I did hear that ultimately what the state wants is to turn TSU into the University of Tennessee, Nashville. Have you heard that?
I have not heard that. I don't know. I know there was sort of the Memphis scenario that there's like, that's, I'm just not, I haven't kept up with what the sort of Board of Regents conversation's been. I mean, they've overhauled so many things in higher education at the state level over just the past decade that I don't really know.
Yeah, I get it. I've been here, 24 years, and North Nashville, or just the city of Nashville, without Tennessee State University being as it is
hard to imagine.
Yeah, I can't even wrap my mind around that. Like, that's.
I think I'll just say, and I think most of the country is understanding this right now, is that that much uncertainty and volatility is not healthy. And so my hope is that even just getting to a period of some stability, knowing that you can go a year or more without profound changes and just focus on enrollment and delivery of great educational opportunities and, kind of return. I mean, it's the AOB is now a Grammy winning marching band, right?
We gotta have TSU.
Just keep that spirit of the university alive and well. And I think you'll start to see again that kind of more positive. I mean, it's where growth comes from, right? Is that you can rely on it. It's stable, it's predictable. And that's, I think that we'll get back to that.
I agree. I met you when you were running, And I remember I was at an Equity Alliance event, and I was going there to DJ the event, and you knew who I was, and you were still running for mayor, and I was like, this guy knows who I am. He's got no chance of winning mayor. So congratulations. I should have started with that, but yeah, like I was impressed. I was like, this guy doesn't have a chance.
Way
but
back
like,
machine here.
Yeah, man. So congratulations. I know it's probably been more than what you've asked for so far.
Yeah. I mean, I've told a few people, you sign up for a certain amount, right? That you know is going to be hard, and then they just keep loading up the plate.
Yeah, and I imagine being a blue dot in a red state has issues as well, and you being kind of the head of the biggest blue dot in the state.
They may have been on display over the past week.
Yeah, and we're gonna get to that, right? I don't think many people, any of us, can even wrap our mind around, probably what you have to go through and the politics you have to play, especially with the state. I do want to ask you this though, and I was talking with Alex before the interview started. My wife worked in the Metro Nashville public school system 2 years ago. She only worked there for a year, and I forgot what her title was called, but basically dysregulated kids would be brought to her, and she would, get them regulated. And then take them back to class, which is a great job and a much better way of, to me, calming kids down than when I was in public school, when I was a kid, where they just took you to the principal's office, somebody yelled at you for a little while, which didn't really calm you down much.
Days. I had a third grade teacher who may have showed the entire class the paddle she kept in her desk
exactly.
So show us.
I'm happy that we've evolved that much. But one thing we noticed in the public school sector was just like everybody is overworked, overstimulated, from the kids to the adults, everybody. And the one thing that we know from all studies that I've ever looked at is that the better educated a child is in childhood, the less likely they are to later on commit a crime. So when and I know your budget has more money in it for schools this year, which is amazing, which is great. But why don't we look at education as crime prevention, just as a society as a whole? Not necessarily talking about anything in particular you're doing, but why don't we look at it as crime prevention? Because crime prevention is always more police officers, more equipment, more prisons, more this and that, but it's never talked about. Education is never talked about in that manner.
So I've talked about it a little bit, and I'll say I mean, I can't necessarily answer for the bigger picture question, but I will say is you've hit on something where education and opportunity, especially concentrated poverty alone, childhood poverty, but especially when that is, you are in a context where you do not know anybody in your social dynamic, maybe even intergenerationally, who does not exist in a context of poverty, and then take those things and roll in what have been called for years now adverse childhood experiences, where you may have, sure, maybe there is an element of poverty to it, but you may have exposure to domestic violence, or even just a lack of parent in the household, or there may be crime in your neighborhood, and you take all of these things and add them up. You can look at all of those things, and to your point, when you address those as root causes, you do start to see downstream very positive effects. When you lower a city's adverse childhood experiences score, when you increase educational attainment in schools, when you start to create opportunity pathways out of mixed income scenarios rather than concentrated poverty, in every single one of those cases, you've already said it. I mean, the studies always show that not only the area where those people are growing up becomes better, but then wherever people who grow up out of that go, whether they stay at home, in their hometown, or move on to another area, the after effects of that tend to always be positive. It's one of the big reasons why, if you paid any attention at all to our State of Metro address, we made $1 million pledge that we are fulfilling in the budget to Begin Bright, which is an early childhood literacy campaign that's going to have little libraries in every child care center in the city. So there's a whole bunch of people raising a lot more money than we're putting into it, but it's going to have the effect of, by the end of it, hundreds of child care centers, all with books that kids have access to, not only while they're in their daycare, but also can take home. And then we've been working closely with My Brother's Keeper, which is specifically a program focused not just, I mean, it does have a focus on early childhood literacy for young men of color, but it also wants them to have a lifelong pathway of access to safety and opportunity built on that foundation of early childhood literacy. So we became a certified MBK community a few years ago, and we're now trying to get to that point where we can accelerate to being a model community for this, which means not only will we have kind of like what we've seen with Begin Bright, some funding support for it, you turn around and invest that funding right into improving the lives of our young men of color, often in those challenging contexts that you're describing.
I like that. And you did raise, or you proposed the budget. Your budget hasn't been approved yet, but there was more education spending. Is that harder to find those dollars, especially since the state with the voucher program has taken a lot of money out of what we were working with before?
It is a challenge, but we feel like this is a priority. There are some things in that school's budget that are very good things that we kind of achieved during COVID that we want to hang on to. We achieved a decades-long goal of having a nurse in every school. We're not going to walk back from that. We expanded Community Achieves, which specifically focuses on schools that may have more socioeconomic challenges in the student and family population, and it supports the families in those circumstances. And we're not going to walk back from that. We expanded the scholars portfolio, which pushed us to the top tier across the country of urban school districts for learning recovery after the pandemic. And so we're also not going to walk away from that. And so to preserve those investments for the next several years means, yeah, I mean, we are looking at this as an investment in our future.
How much money did the state basically pull from Nashville with vouchers?
So this most recent voucher issue didn't hit us quite as hard because we were in one of the first handful of cities. This one pushed it statewide. We've already seen a little bit of impact. It's actually been a combination of a few things. It's the fiscal pressure of having state authorized and not locally authorized charter schools. It's the education savings accounts and vouchers, and then it's the new state funding formula called TISA that doesn't seem to as completely account for some of the challenges that urban school districts face. And so we have seen some funding challenges there. And so, yeah, I mean, we have to absorb some of that. It rates it seems like every year based on some combination of enrollment factors, funding formula, we find that we're covering, 8 figures worth, so $10 million or more of impact from state funding.
Let me ask you this, as a parent of a kid who's in private school, and is there any benefit since the voucher program is out there? I don't feel right taking the vouchers. At the same time, if it's not making any difference and it's going to save me a few $100s a month, does it make a difference whether or not families choose to, on their own conscience, take the voucher money or not?
I mean, here's what I would say. If you have already chosen, if your student, if your family has already chosen not to enroll in public schools, not as much, but across the board for every student who is not there, it does mean less dollars flowing into our public school system that kind of becomes that investment in the school. So, I mean, we've got our 2 daughters, one in public elementary, one in public middle. And, I know that's the biggest part of every dollar of property taxes, every dollar of sales taxes I pay go to the investment in their futures. And I can tell you from where we're seeing that return on investment every day. But I know also, as somebody who went to both public and private school in my K through 12 journey, different families make different choices for different reasons. And if you're already not there and it's a financial decision that makes sense for your family, then I think that's why you always see these passionate conversations about education, is because I think every family and it's the same thing you see about the way that people get exercise usually has to do most with how they're taking care of their own family, and whether that's where you live, where you go to school, and what school you go to, all those kinds of things. I mean, I have a tremendous amount of understanding of how people get to that point where they need to make the right decision for their children, their family.
Gotcha. I'm gonna date myself here, but I bought my first house in Nashville. It was a condo at Riverfront. God, this was 2007, nearly
Yep.
20 years ago.
Oh, you're like me. You caused the Great Recession.
Yeah. So I bought it for $110,000. It was a 1-bedroom, 1-bath, 650 square feet, right on the river, right downtown.
I know exactly where that
is. Yeah. So that was my first place I ever bought. I wish I still had it for obvious reasons, but I was making probably 40, 50 grand a year, which is still seems to me kind of the starting salary of people out of college. And I could afford a home in not just in Nashville, but downtown Nashville. That house is now worth like 450 for the same 1-bedroom. And there's no way somebody making 40 or 50 grand can afford it at this point. So what are we doing, for affordable housing? Because I do feel like real estate is something that I feel like I was able to get into real estate right before the door closed. And like anybody younger than me, it's rough.
I feel, especially in Nashville, very much the same way we bought in 2007, not too far away, in the Salemtown neighborhood.
Yeah.
And it was wild. It was like we went from a fairly affordable mixed income neighborhood, and then it was almost like the recession happened and we came out the other side, and it was like we skipped a step.
Yeah.
And what used to be sort of the ceiling for housing prices suddenly became the floor.
Yeah.
And you just watched it go up from there. And that's been a thing that now for a decade, because I got elected to Metro Council in 2015, and we started immediately as a council, as a planning department, working on some affordable housing strategies. But what we kind of the next big marker we laid down in this year's State of Metro that we will be working on for the rest of the term is housing affordability in the city. We just got a unified housing strategy from our planning department, and it is full of data, and it has a couple things it lays out. Not only does it show some new tools we ought to be using from a housing affordability standpoint, it also it highlights that over the next decade, in order to just have where you bend the curve down a little bit in terms of helping make sure that if you're earning $40,000-$50,000 a year and you're starting out in your career in Nashville, or if you're on a fixed income and you're retired, or if you are an hourly seasonal worker with different opportunities in front of you, or if you're a songwriter or an aspiring creative in the city, you're going to need to be able to live somewhere within arm's reach of the city to take advantage of all the opportunity here. And so to get there, we've got to figure out how to make room for and how to find funding for 90,000 homes over the next decade. And so that's part of that project. But we also have 526 square miles. So we're a big city in the sense that we're 700,000 and change people all within that one county, but also we're a big city in that most cities our size are actually considerably smaller geographically. And so we've got room to run, but it's always, again, come back to that conversation about, protecting where your family is, and that you think about everything about the character of your neighborhood and all the things from traffic and parking to crime and character. And so none of this will be an easy conversation. It won't be cheap. It won't be easy. Right? I mean, those are the hard parts, right?
Obviously, one of the more important issues, especially to our listeners, was community oversight, and that got downgraded. That happened like right before you took office, correct?
Right before I took office, the state took a statewide approach to the idea of civilian oversight of policing that partially preempted it. They basically, for any city that had an existing civilian oversight process, they made some modifications, and you had to jump through some hoops by a deadline. And if you didn't, you basically would have lost that pathway. And I think some other cities may have actually lost that pathway to civilian oversight. We took it on as an early priority. and preserved it in the more limited form. But we had a couple goals. We didn't want to miss that deadline. We did want to preserve civilian oversight under the new state law, and we didn't want to lose jobs while we did it. So we accomplished those goals, but the state certainly did kind of dial down a notch the level of authority we have in that oversight process.
And so as it sits now, what do we do for oversight? Like what does that look like if something happens and people want answers? What does oversight look like now?
Yeah, we still do have a community review board,
right?
And they do still have staff. There still are citizen appointees that come from the mayor's office that are on that board. They do have a process. They do have the opportunity to review things. We'd set up a couple things. There is now a full agreement between that community review board and the department that ensures that there is a pathway of communication. We also went as far as we could under state law to give them some independence and legal advice and counsel that they can get. And so all of that is in effect. And so they're working through a process of timeliness of things like body cam footage and investigations of the scenarios they were created to investigate. But they just recently, for instance, produced some recommendations on sexual misconduct. We took those, reviewed them. We had our Human Resources Department, our Department of Law, and the Metro Nashville Police Department all review those and adopted the things that we legally could.
Does MMPD have to answer to the community review board if they need footage? Do they have to turn it over to them, or is it kind of at their?
The agreement lays out a lot of the operational mechanics. I mean, there are some things that changed under state law, whereas before it was almost like there was kind of a protected environment, but the MOU, the agreement that we got, kind of allows for this. In that disruptive period of state law, they sort of lost the ability to have that be protected and now have to request it. And MMPD isn't going to turn over things that are under active investigation in a way that could become a public record because it's in active investigation. And so we had to kind of sort that out legally. But by and large, there is an avenue whereby MMPD does have a measure of accountability with the CRB, but it is not quite as that level of accountability is not as robust as it was originally conceived under our local approach.
Okay. And we got to ask about ICE, man. I have friends that DJ downtown in Broadway, and they were hitting me up, I think last night, just last night, saying that there were raids on Broadway and people were shutting their kitchens down early. And I know a lot of those bar owners down there, I've dealt with them personally over the years, voted in a way for which let this kind of happen. And now I think they're probably, I would imagine if they're having to close their kitchens down, they're a little upset about that. But I have spoken with two community organizers that I trust pretty well. One of which in the migrant community. And this is what I was telling Alex before you came in, was just like, I think, because I felt this way, not about you, but just about Democratic politicians in general, is that we elect Democratic politicians and they say all the things that we want to hear. And then they get in office and you're just like, just fight. I don't care if you lose, just fight. So I spoke with two different community organizers. One said, you've literally done everything you can do. The other said, I think the feeling was they wanted to see you fight a little harder. And I know a lot of this has been going on. I know you had some mandates over the past week. Explain exactly what's going on with ICE and, the actions that you've taken so far.
No, this has been tough. And I would say this has probably been the hardest week because you highlighted it. It's not just that we're a blue dot in a red state, but we're also in a scenario unlike in 2016 when you watched the presidency have at least one check in Congress. We're now at a place where there is
no checks.
There's no checks. Yeah. I mean, Congress is not doing anything on tariffs, on immigration. I mean, they are just giving the president an unusually large pass to do things that are clearly unconstitutional, from violations of due process to defying court orders. Yeah. There's not a level of accountability there. And so we're even less well positioned than we might otherwise be, because we don't even have a congressional representative that lives in the city of Nashville right now.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's not a place we can easily turn to say, we need you to stand with us. And so where we are is we have tightened up the process of reporting and accountability, so that if a metro entity is contacted by federal authorities, that kind of comes up the chain and we get notification of it. We've seen some examples of that already in just the past few days, where that system does seem to be working. And then we are also, we have called directly for release of the names of people who have been detained and the charges that they were taken under, because there are supposed to be clear charges. If you are arrested by the Metro Nashville Police Department, we're going to know what those charges were as a matter of public record. And so our legal department is working on that. We have partners outside the mayor's office all working on that. We've got people trying to represent those folks. We announced a fund specifically to support people who had been impacted by this immigration crisis called the Belonging Fund. And we are continuing to do the work of traditional public safety. I mean, that's what's also hard about there, is we have to both maintain a level of trust and confidence in the policing process and also try to get violent criminals off the streets, because these are people that are doing harm to our communities, and we're trying to deliver both at once. But over the past week, this is a place where our police were doing the correct thing. We watched state and federal authorities do something we didn't raise our hands and ask for, did not have any level of coordination with. And so we've been trying to respond as forcefully as we can.
So for people saying that they had, the MNPD was involved in that, because I have seen people say that the MNPD cars at the ICE facility, I think there was like two people that said that they had been released. And
request for service that came in, they only showed up to respond to that request for service. They otherwise had no level of coordination with THP or ICE.
Okay. All right. Are you, I know there's going to be protests. Are you going to show up in any of the protests?
We've seen some level of activity. It kind of, all of these things always depend on what I get invited to, who the organizers are. I'm mostly trying to be in a position of protecting the community as best I can and supporting them as best I can. I mean, to me, this is a moment of, we're trying to govern the city. We're trying to keep people safe. We're trying to protect our communities. We're trying to still be welcoming.
Right.
And that is not, I'm not just trying to see, that's what I'm focused on.
Gotcha. All right. Two quick questions. I'll let you out of here. One, you said you had two daughters.
Yep.
If your daughter, let's say your daughters are grown and one of their husbands had been pulled over and that they were, here undocumented, and they were here undocumented, and they were snatched up off the street by state or by ICE or whoever. Do you feel like you've done everything that you could do to save that person, that husband of your daughters?
I mean, here's what I will say. I am aware of the people going to fight for their legal rights.
Mm-hmm.
I have been, a part of the process of making sure that that the funding is available for family supports. If it were my family that were involved, I mean, that's kind of I would have my own lawyer involved, right? But I will tell you, our Department of Law is doing what we can to make sure that we've got legal protections and that people know their rights in these circumstances.
And my final question is a fun one. Back in 2013, the very first honorary street was named after Curtis Scooby Sr., my former radio partner, on the corner of 14th and Jefferson. What are the odds that we see a James Dolewite Raymer Street, adjacent to that at some point?
I'm going to tell you, I don't want you to leave us too soon. Right?
No, I don't want to have to go. I mean, you guys can do this while I'm still alive. You know what I'm saying? Like, we can do this now. I don't care.
We do have some things that restrict you from, you can't generally, there are some limits on renamings for people who are still alive.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, there are some policy. And so in fact, there had to be kind of a special exception when we renamed Diane Nash Plaza right outside of Public Square. That was actually not, there had to be a vote on that, because it wasn't,
You guys should change
ordinarily.
that. You should give people their flowers in their streets while they're still alive.
There's two modes of thinking about this. One is to give them their flowers.
Yes.
The other is make sure you don't jump too soon into somebody whose life is not fully understood.
Oh yeah.
Because you may have seen, like, if you
catch a couple charges,
thing,
you can always rename it. If I catch a charge later on in my life, you can always rename it. You can go right back to 14th Ave.
Yeah.
After that, I wouldn't be offended. I would just be like, I deserve that. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Freddie O'Connell, thank you so much for doing this, man. Anytime you want to come up here, if you want to share information, like, the invitation is open. Have them contact me. You're the first sitting mayor in my 24-year career here to do this. And I believe I am at this point the longest radio program with one station in the city of Nashville. So
goodness.
it's crazy, right?
All right.
Yeah. So
record setting.
Record setting. It deserves a street. Thank you so much for doing this.
Glad to be with you.
Man, that was great.